Good morning. Today is Monday, March 12th. It is 6:40 a.m. Central Standard Time, and welcome to the Crushing Iron Triathlon Podcast.
Good morning.
A record for Mr. Mike Trolley.
Records are made to be broken.
And I'm just going to lay it out there, man. Of all the people I expected to get a text from at 6:20 on a Monday morning, you weren't even in the top 50.
Oh, how they underestimate me out there.
Up and at 'em to get it in. Mike is traveling and is in Houston, and we weren't able to connect yesterday, and we were going to do it at some point today. And hey, I'm getting Hayden ready for school and trying to help Allie get out the door. And I get a little text. Hey man, I'm up. Let's do this. So here we are, on schedule, getting you your daily or your bi-weekly dose of the podcast on Mondays and Thursdays. So we appreciate you tuning in. And for you West Coasters, we'll probably get this out for your morning drive. So you can thank Mike for that.
It's very possible. You know, this may be the first step to me getting back in the groove. Morning groove.
You want to set yourself up with that kind of an expectation? I'm not sure. I mean, as I know you're about to watch March Madness, even though you say you're probably not because Wisconsin's not in it, but you're going to be up late watching some basketball this week. I got a feeling.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, even though I'm going to have to forgive that Selection Sunday show. Jesus.
Oh, was it bad?
Oh, they changed the format.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't. I turned it on and they did the South bracket, I think, first. And I saw where Tennessee got a 3 seed in the South bracket, which is, good God, is it loaded. Major loaded. But yeah. I turned it off after that.
Oh, which you should have. How they did it is they came out first and they announced the 32 automatic bids, like every school. So they basically said, all right, these teams are in, and then they came back, and in alphabetical order, they announced the other at-large teams.
Oh, my God.
32 of them, and then they went to the brackets after that.
Yeah, that's not, I'm going to give my stamp of non-approval for that, too.
Yeah, well, anyway, but I got to say, I'm all about forgiveness right now. So I'm letting that go. Okay. I'm letting it go. I'm forgiving myself for not being an early morning person all the time, and look what happens.
Mm-hmm. Good things happen
when you're too hard on yourself and you criticize yourself, and that kind of perpetuates the problem, I believe. I mean, I've always felt that, but I'm really starting to kind of take it to heart a little bit more.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, it does. I mean, and you should. I mean, you should always listen. The hardest people to forgive are ourselves, for the most part.
Yeah.
You know, we always tend to hold ours I think that's for a lot of various reasons, but we kind of hold ourselves to a different standard of living in life, which I think you should. I think that it's hard, but it can really open a lot of doors for a better and happier living when you tend to forgive yourself and not beat yourself up on a daily basis about not doing this or not being this, and just doing you and doing the best you can and showing yourself a little grace every once in a while. Yeah,
man. I think that's very applicable to the world of triathlon, to be honest. I think we get in. We're tough on ourselves. We're trying to do something tough, and then we get tougher on ourselves sometimes. I have to put this quote out there because it's been on my mind. All right, can you mind?
Of course I don't, man. And listen, you're up at 6:30. It's your world, baby. You can own this podcast, and I'll just fill in whenever I need to.
Now I'm gonna find the guy who said, I forgot his name offhand, but it just blew my, because it's sort of on that lines of forgiveness and how people struggle in life, and this guy's a doctor, and he really has made his life work about kind of trying to figure out what happened to people early in their lives that have caused the problems that they're dealing with later in life.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote is, "We all come into this world loving and wanting to be loved. Then something happens, and it's a long ways back."
Mm.
And it just blows my mind. I like to think about, because like his big thing is, and I don't know if this is where the podcast is going, but it's just been something that I've been thinking about, is that so many things happen to us in our like when we're forming our brain as children, that really kind of shape our whole lives. And I'm sure you've dealt with this and talked about this many times because of, going through treatment and stuff. But and a lot of times those things aren't necessarily sort of like major traumas or anything like that, but they're just sort of little things that sort of shape the way we think about things. And I think that's one, the forgiveness piece that I've been thinking about, and like sort of the guilt we suffer from missing workouts or not, hitting our times or all these little things. And I just think it's such a fascinating topic. I
think yeah. I mean, I love that topic, and it's 100% true. I mean, I know when I was in treatment, and I think one of my, I think this is pretty common knowledge. I'm sure I won't get the exact years correct, but I think something between like the ages of like 6 and 12 or something like that, or maybe it's like 4 and 10 of how old you are, is when like a majority of like your personality and who you are like forms.
Mm-hmm.
So all these things that happen to you, all these things that you go through, like that's what ends up like really putting you on this path of who you're, things you like, things you don't like, personality traits, all kinds of things. And that's why it's so difficult for a lot of people. And the reason I went through this, because when I had some trauma in my early childhood, it was during that time frame. And so your views and how you see things and feel about things are like warped totally. And so as you get older, you think, oh, well, no wonder I feel this way, because when I was like, when your brain was forming and you were becoming, pretty much who you are by the time you're like 10, you've had all these things happen, which has totally shaped and warped your sense of reality or self, or what they would call is like you totally lost, touch with what they would call like your inner child. Like you were forced to grow up at a very early age. And so you just basically skipped out on these specific parts of how you're supposed to grow up and how you're supposed to mature and all these things. And so you basically spend the rest of your life trying to get back there.
Mm-hmm.
And they do that a lot with people that are older. I mean, anybody. I know for a fact there's some people who listen to this podcast that have had trauma when they were young. Is like you spend a lot of your life trying to like get back and nurture what they would call like your inner child that didn't feel regardless of what it was, didn't feel safe, didn't feel loved, wasn't taken care of. All these things. So it basically, like you said, or like the quote is, like you spend the rest of your life trying to get back there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it even forms, like, I mean, like especially as a new parent for me, so many things that I do or don't do now are because of, things that I know I went through when I was a kid, my relationship with my dad, or lack thereof, and like how I want to be a parent and a father and what I want to see for our relationship and what I don't. And it's all trying to like get back to like, 30 years ago, but I think that also is also applicable when you start sports, is that there are so many things that can happen to you early on in a journey or in a sport that can be all consuming, that can derail a positive experience, or basically taint it for the remainder of your experience in that athletic arena, even if it's not triathlon, if it's all kinds of different sports. I mean, I know mine was swimming. It took me a long time to get back to a love of swimming because I hated it so much, which is why I quit and why I left. And
you probably hated it because you were going at it from the wrong place.
Yeah, I mean, I was basically. I mean, I wouldn't say I was forced to, but swimming year round, and I was actually very, very talented. And my parents were adamant, or just very, very much not so much both. Mostly my dad was very much opposed to me quitting. I mean, it was like a devastation that I was quitting swimming year round when I decided to do it, and I just ended up hating it. I fell back in love with it a little bit when I started to swim in summer league because it's a lot more kind of lax and just kind of fun. But I always just had this feeling of more of like it was always a have to sport for me, and I still think honestly some days I still feel like that. If it still feels like a have to, even though when it should be a want to and a get to. And I think that like in triathlon, whether it's training or you have a bad experience with a coach or other athletes or a race or these expectations that you basically spend the rest of your triathlon journey trying to live up to these expectations or this, like I know athletes that have gotten into this, and I'm thinking of one in particular that this is a few years ago that barely got into the sport, and this individual's blog immediately became about how I'm going to become a professional triathlete.
Mm-hmm.
And 24/7 blogged about it, and you never saw very much anything positive because he wasn't even getting close. And then I think he quit basically 2 years later and did something else. But we put these expectations on ourselves early on, and then you basically spend the rest of your journey or the rest of your triathlon or athletic career, whatever you want to call it, trying to get back to what we thought we wanted to do with it, and still trying to like figure out what exactly it is that's going to like really make us happy.
Yeah. It makes me wonder why that guy, I mean, like, really what was at the core of him deciding that he was going to be a pro triathlete? It was a he?
It was a he, yeah.
I mean, yeah, like, you ever think about, like, what, was there something there to prove, or was it just a goal? I mean, I guess you can just have goals and stuff like that, but if if that's like your obsession and you're not doing it for, like you said, yourself or for reasons that you really want to do them, then it can just be like forcing, what do you say, the round peg in the hole?
Yes.
See, I couldn't come up with a fake one for that.
Square peg in a round hole, or
cupcakes into the berry hole.
Cupcakes in the berries, yeah, but it is. It's like, but listen, there are loads and loads of athletes who get into, and that's why, to be honest with you, like, while I see the merit and I see the benefit of why Kona and the World Championships and Ironman triathlon are used as a broadcast for NBC and as marketing material for the Ironman engine. But that is what a lot of people aspire to when they start, because a lot of people see that and have never been exposed to triathlon. And they see that and they think, that's it. If I don't go there, then I'm basically not a triathlete. I mean, I'm sure there are tons of triathletes that listen to this podcast that when you tell a friend, like, yeah, I do triathlons, like, well, have you done the one in Hawaii?
Yeah.
And you're like,
no, I'm not that good.
No. Like, no, there's like a million, there's like over there's hundreds of thousands of triathletes across the world, and every year about 1,500 earn their way to go. So no, I haven't been. But that's their mindset. I even know athletes specifically. Yeah, I'm just getting in the sport, and I want to get to Kona in 2 years.
I said it many times.
I mean, lots of people say it. I've said it before. And is it still a dream and a goal of mine? It is. But when you start with a mindset of basically it's this or nothing, then you put a cap and you put a limit on what you're actually going to be able to get out of triathlon. Because we're talking about triathlon specifically, because everything becomes an obsession. And it becomes an expectation of I mean, listen, I'm all for relentless pursuit of trying to get better, but if your relentless pursuit of getting better is also matched with only a singular outcome as validating your existence or participation in said sport, then I think that that's somewhat unhealthy. And I get it from like an Olympic standpoint. To be like the very, 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 very best in the world, you have to have this. I think that's true, but I think that if you're using it as like how to validate you as an individual or your place in the sport, then those are people that you see that burn out quick and just fall by the wayside, or have a very, very, very hard time post sport. When you look at their relationship, that's like very common in professional athletes. When you see professional athletes like really, really, really struggling once they retire, or they retire and then retire, retire and then retire, retire and then retire. A lot of it's just because they frankly don't know who they're going to be post sport, because it's become their identity. And they just can't fathom, okay, well, now I'm just going to be me, not the triathlete, not the Ironman finisher, not this. So now what the hell am I going to do? And so I think that it's just something that you have to very carefully wade your way into. And that's why I think it's so important for when you get into any sport, and triathlon especially, because it can be all consuming, and it does take so much time, and there is so much investment in time and training and what you ask from your family and financially, and like planning a year out, that you really have a good grasp on how you start. Because, and listen, I know this from firsthand experience as a coach, that a lot of my job with a lot of athletes that have done the sport for a year, 2 years, whatever it is deprogramming them from how they enter the sport, in terms of their daily expectations and how hard they are on themselves, and trying to kind of reshape it into this is supposed to be fun, you're supposed to love this, you're supposed to enjoy it, versus I hate it, but I still do it, because if I quit, it would be a failure, or I wouldn't really know what to do next.
Wow. That's very common, huh?
It's incredibly common.
Yeah.
Like, or they hate a part of their of the disciplines, because they never thought they would be able to do this. And we have all these. It's weird, because like so many of these things are also because like this is how this specific athlete was like shaped when they were younger as a person, before they got into triathlon. Like, I'm not good enough, or I'm never going to be an athlete, or I'm always going to be this. And then you get into a sport that perpetuates this fantasy land of 100-pound chicks in bikinis that work out and train, and dudes that weigh 140 and are ripped and have endless amount of time to train and always consume this. And you're like, that ain't fucking life. and I can tell you right now, most of that stuff isn't even true. Like, but it's just a very delicate sport to get into, and there are many pitfalls and many reasons for burnout. But yeah, I mean, like, athletes that get into the sport, and I have some of them right now who got into it. I mean, they get into it for the right reasons, but it's also because of their personality and how they were raised and how they've become, and things that have happened to them, where they struggle with, I can't, or I won't, and yeah, that's your mind lying to you, but it's that same mind that you've had for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
But that's also where triathlon can do good in terms of reversing how you think about yourself.
I think so too. I think it's a long game, and when you set expectations like that, like we're talking about Kona or whatever. Look, I was listening to a interview with this guy who was a high school, like a prodigy in football and baseball and basketball. He's from Arizona, two-time state champion in football, quarterback. He was a shortstop of the baseball team. He grew up near Phoenix, and all he wanted was to get a scholarship to Arizona State to play baseball. And he, every day in a high school, he was just working his ass off, and he's taking swings before practice and before school even, and all. He was just I think he came from a Mormon background, and his dad was really like focused on it, and then he got his scholarship to Arizona State, and he got there, and within a year, I think he said, he was kicked off the team, and he was into drinking, and next thing you know, he ended up spiraling down sort of a heroin train or something and almost killed himself, and now he's recovered and stuff like that. But he had his goal set as making the team, and then he thought he reached it. And, I guess in some ways it just makes me think of Kona. Or, it's like, what do you do after you get to Kona? If that's the epitome. If you just want to get there, you know what I mean? And then you sort of force yourself and create these unreasonable expectations, and like this, you take the fun out of it. I mean, when we talk about, like, the analogy I like to use with us is that, we've heard a lot of suggestions about, or at least in our own minds, we've kind of gone around about how to make the podcast more like a, organized show and all these kind of things like that. And we keep going about.
There's your alarm.
That was my alarm. See,
I knew
it. I was up like an hour before that. But that's the thing, right? Like I'm glad I just woke up, and I woke up, but because I hate
it's the architecture of your expectation.
Mm-hmm. We created this podcast because we wanted to kind of just talk about triathlon and have fun with it, and I, to this day, still love doing it, and if we were to like put all these download goals on it and expectations all the time, and how can we do this, and how can we scale it, and how can we get these numbers and all this stuff, it would probably turn into a nightmare, because it's not really in our personality at this point, or we're just doing what feels good, and it's been consistent, and it's something that I literally enjoy every time we get on. And I can't speak for you, but I think that you do. I mean, I think it's just.
Of course, no. I love it. I mean, and we talked about it before.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, and we talked about this with other things we do. Like in how much. I mean, let's be honest. We put out a shit ton of free content for people to consume, and free advice, and free training, and free this, and like that's what our podcast is. Like, our podcast isn't endless interviews with random ass people. It's free training, advice. It's free this. It's free videos. It's free Facebook. It's a lot of things that are free. And we've always talked about before, like, how do we want to do this one? And I'm like, nah, but then if we try to do X, Y, and Z, then our expectation, then we're now going to have an expectation for that result. And so now it's going to take away the joy that we have in doing it, in loving helping people, and just doing it in general, because now we expect an exact specific result. And so if we don't get that specific result, we either need to keep working harder to fix it, or it's a failure, or we didn't succeed. And so it isn't like you said about the baseball player, like in kind of what I was alluding to about like the architecture of your expectation is just the nature of saying you're putting a ceiling on something, which is for that guy was like making the Arizona State baseball team. You enclose yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing left. There is nothing outside of it. You have reached the pinnacle, and you've basically put a stop sign on your journey that could be endless. So instead of putting like a pit stop or a rest stop or wherever you're going, you can just, as whatever it is, whether it's making USAT nationals, whether it's finishing an Ironman, whether it's finishing your first triathlon, like they should all be pit stops along the way. They shouldn't be a dead end. And we oftentimes create these dead ends to where if we don't navigate perfectly and don't end up in dead end and park in this exact spot, then the whole drive was just an epic failure. Or we get there, and then we're just like, okay, well, where the hell do I go now? Because I haven't given myself any outs.
Right. That's what I'm
I
getting
can't.
at. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't take a straight here. I can't take a straight here. And then you're like, well, shit. Like, well, now I guess I have to go back to Kona, or I'm gonna fail again this year. And there are tons of athletes that do that.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, there are also, don't get me wrong, there are also loads and loads of athletes that are at that it's, I don't want to say it's more reasonable for them, but let's be honest, it is. That they can say it, that they don't probably look at it as a failure, but the reason they probably get back is because they don't look at it as a failure. They look at it as, hey, I want to do really, really well. I know that I can compete. I just want to keep getting better and see what happens. You know, they have that itch. They have that hunger. It's not, and that's the thing. It's not a hunger that can be satiated. It's not, you can't be satisfied. Because if they were satisfied, they would have just punched their ticket and then been like, oh, this is it? Okay, well, I don't want to go back again. Or I have to go back. Or I have to go back. You know, or you see it with all kinds. You see it with the Boston Marathon, too. You know, I get there, then I've got to go back the next year. I got to go back the next year. I got to go back the next year. Or basically, I'm not a runner. You know, and so you just have all these dead end expectations with no outlet. And once you reach the dead end so many times, you're eventually gonna look up and be like, I don't even really know where to go from here. So I'm just gonna, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an unhealthy way to look at everything versus just making things stops along the way and then enjoying it. And listen, it ain't easy. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, you know, I haven't fallen into that trap before or you know, thought that way and had to kind of self-correct or don't have, you know, fleeting thoughts about this and that, where I have to be like, listen, remind yourself what's most important and remind yourself with this and rein it back in and don't limit yourself to, you know, it's all about sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And dead end expectations are by definition not sustainable.
Yeah, we had a post the other day, and I think you kind of referenced it a little bit earlier. But a woman, she posted a lot of quotes that she's heard from the podcast and stuff, and then on her whiteboard. And then you know how much I like whiteboards, and
you are.
And in the middle, she put, because she'd been struggling with the concept that she didn't play sports when she was younger, and she has a struggle with this idea that she's actually an athlete. So in the middle of her whiteboard, she put, I am an athlete. And I think that was awesome from so many levels, because what is that? You know, if that's your we're talking about goals or expectations. And I mean, to think of, like, even I, who played a lot of sports, when I think about that, and if I think about telling myself, you know, I am an athlete, and that is such a wide open kind of thing, but it sort of like subconsciously points me towards my goal, and it helps me with my belief system, even just thinking about it that way, you know, rather than I am a triathlete who's going to Kona. You know, but like if I believe, you know, it's like her whole thing is like, and I think it was so awesome because it's just about believing in yourself and feeling good about yourself and doing something because you love it. And she's pursuing this path, and she has this struggle with being an athlete, but you know, she's believing it more just a little bit each day, and it's not like it's not a concrete goal that ends. You know what I mean? So I like stuff like that because it's sort of a centering piece, you know.
Yeah.
But it sort of takes you to this thing about like just, you know, being a little bit better each day, and that doesn't mean faster. That just means more in love with what you're doing.
Yep.
And however you get there is the question. You know.
And I think that you have to have you have to leave yourself open to that possibility. You know, and that's one of the hardest things that we as flawed, often emotionally and mentally, you know, people and humans do so often is that we concrete these self-beliefs in ourselves, and then we have an incredibly hard time forgiving ourselves, and then we can't understand how we become something different. And I've just never seen myself as an athlete, or I just never thought I would be, a person who could run a sub 10 minute, or this, and this. I mean, and that's why coaching is so incredible. Like I had a couple athletes this last weekend who I thought were going to, like just totally like break through a barrier, but I didn't want to say anything because then you add like an expectation, and well, coach thinks I can do this, so I can. And sometimes I'm way off because when it comes down to race day, the coach doesn't race, the athlete does, and it is all on the athlete, and you can limit them, and then you can also put expectations on them, and that's why I'm just not a huge fan of, and I frustrate the hell out of my athletes sometimes. Well, tell me what you think I can do this. I'm like, first of all, we're 4 months out, no idea. But even there, I give them like a time frame what they could do, possibly, but ultimately it's up to the athlete. And I had an athlete this last weekend who went sub 9 average on a 5K, which I know for this athlete was just like something they didn't even like think was even like remotely possible months and months and months ago. But every time you like break through a ceiling like that, that we pencil ourselves in, and you find like, oh, and like the point isn't to like break through a ceiling and then try to break through another one. It's to like break through a ceiling and then look at everything as just totally wide open, where like the world is your oyster kind of thing. Like I can actually, now that that's a common pitfall we fall into is, all right, I've broken through that ceiling, now let's create another one. Because that's also how our mind works. That's how a lot of triathletes are as type A. They want something on pen and paper that they can track down and consume on a daily basis. That is their fuel that will lead them to X. And instead, I know specifically for this athlete, like it was just go out. She never asks about, what do you think I can do? What do you think I can do? What do you think my paces are telling me? What do you think about this? I mean, what you think I'm going to PR or what do you think I'm ready for? Just goes back and enjoys it and has just like shattered all of her expectations. And as a coach, that's your job isn't to have expectations, in my opinion. That might be just me, but I don't have, the only expectation I have of an athlete is to commit to trying to get better and be as consistent as they possibly can and to have fun along the way. But as far as like expecting them to achieve X, Y, and Z, that is not my job. My job is to allow them the opportunity to see and believe that more oftentimes than not, their expectations are actually limiters versus things that push them. And then once they can shelve that idea of, I have to do this, because let's be honest, wanting to and feeling like a specific like passionate drive to do something always trumps the feeling of I have to go practice, I have to go do this, instead of, man, I can't wait to go run today, or I just love doing this, so I can't wait to hit the pool. And it's that mentality versus the other one that makes the whole thing better. And then when you kind of like dress down an athlete and remove expectations and get them from like, and sometimes, I mean, I probably piss them off, but I just ignore them when they ask about times and times and times and times. I'm like, I have no idea, and neither do you, because we're just getting started. B, like, once you start to add in those things, then it becomes about that. And then that's all you think about. And everything becomes a pass or fail instead of just more like, at the end result, a trial and an error. But if you don't have fun doing it and you don't enjoy it, and, you only think that X, Y, and Z is acceptable when all else is a failure, then you're just missing out. And I think that's one of the biggest jobs that a coach has, is to, should you respect and ultimately your goal as a coach is to take an athlete whose goal is X and then get them to do Y so that they can accomplish Z. But at the same time, when you have an athlete that tells you they want to do this, 9 times out of 10, I'm like, oh God, we're gonna like totally demolish that. But I don't say that because then again, you're putting expectations and almost the fear and paralyzing nature of what expectations can be, and that's what they can be, is paralyzing.
Mm-hmm.
And you want everything to feel free and loose and fun, and just let your passion and drive for the sport or this discipline that you love drive the train. And then that will ultimately get you, because the best in the world will tell you, they just love doing what they do. They don't say, yeah, I have to do it. They just love doing what they do.
Mm-hmm. It's a great way to end it, man, because I got to get going. But seriously, I'm
glad I could bring it home for you on that one.
Thanks for bringing it home. No, I would love to keep talking about that, because it's really been a thing for me. It's really personal to me. The ups and downs and being able to love what you're doing, and how expectations can really, jade the whole process. And that's, what we're all about, is process and enjoying the process, every day, and getting incrementally better, or at least moving in that direction every morning or every day. And sometimes it's hard not to not bite off huge chunks, or chunks that are too big for us, and that can really go backwards in a hurry. So,
one of my favorite quotes: "Expectations are just future resentments."
Yep, that is
true.
Solid.
But hey, thanks for tuning in this morning. Big thank you to Mike for getting up early and knocking this out so you guys could have it on Monday as planned. Thank you to everyone who has been hitting us up on the iTunes reviews. They're much appreciated. If you like what you hear, or if you don't much like what you hear, I guess, then feel free to leave us a review on iTunes. It's incredibly helpful for everybody and ourselves in reaching other athletes and helping them as well. And then if you have any questions about gear, we still have hats and visors available, swim analysis, run analysis, our triathlon and swim camps, swim videos, blog, and then anything involving training plans and personalized coaching. You can check all that out at crushingiron.com.
Yep, and if you're on Facebook, which I know you are, search Crushing Iron Group. Come into our private group and make some connections.
Yep, and make some friends. So thanks for listening, and have a great week, and we will get back with you on Thursday.
Sounds good. Thanks for listening.
Man, see you, dude.
Bye-bye.